This conference will now be recorded.
Well, good morning from Geneva, Illinois and West Suburban Chicago, and welcome to the August Leasing Council call. As always, we're grateful to Julian Velos from SVN Corporate, who's running the backstage component, and he can jump in if anyone has any technical issues. The call is being recorded, so you can listen later or pass it on to others in your office. Our goal with all of the council calls is to use the culture of collaboration to share best practices, strengthen the resources of the company, and improve our services to our clients. We're hoping this call has some good open discussions, so feel free to jump in with questions or comments if you wish. In order to make that process work, please use your computer or phone. Julian has muted us, but you can unmute either if you're on the computer by hitting the little red microphone, or *6 if you're on your phone. That way we can control background actions like dogs and babies and sirens, etc. Leasing, here's just a review of the product councils. Leasing is one of 18 product councils or specialty practice areas listed on the SVN corporate website. Be sure to join any others that you're a regular part of in your practice or otherwise interest you. Because leasing crosses platforms a little bit, and asset types, we send out invitations to office, retail, industrial, medical office, and property management. Within the Leasing Council, we have over 130 members, advisors signed up. If you have not yet joined, please do. The Product Council pages can be accessed through the SVN dashboard. Go to svn.com, and then in the Collaboration Center, click on the leasing icon. That way you'll receive our leasing related communication. If you have something you'd like to share with others between calls, you can send it to send an email to leasing@svn.com, and that'll go out to everyone who has signed up and also automatically appear as a post on the Leasing Council Communication Hub. At any point, feel free to contact Walt, Arnold, or me. We are the council co-chairs if you have any leasing related questions. This call is intended to be an open dialogue, so please do jump in. We all benefit by the extra participation. This focus of this call is a little more discussion about the unique challenges and opportunities related to doing leasing of commercial real estate in this upside down year of 2020. One initial request, I really would like to have this call be a politics-free zone as much as possible. The COVID-19 pandemic is just one of the big headlines that's made this year unique and challenging, and 2020 has left its imprint on many parts of our lives. And leasing commercial real estate is certainly no exception. For our call this month, I wanted to feature a variety of lease deals that had happened or didn't happen because of the craziness of 2020, and several advisors, including Walt and me, are going to share some examples from the trenches. Here is our lineup, and there will be a chance for you to share your own lease deals if there's an interesting or informative story and you'd be willing to share it. So Walt, why don't you get us started? Here's your Rio Rancho deal.
Thanks, Neil. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. Thanks. I just wanted to, one of the things I wanted to talk about today was just, something I think that a trend we're going to start to see in the market. And these are I have two stories from Albuquerque, and both of them are around call center space. And this is a building in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, 7001 Zenith. This tenant last year signed a 15-year lease, and they just announced that they are vacating this space and everybody's going to go work from home. And so now this space is for sublease, again, 75,000 square feet. So what's happening is these tenants that have signed these long-term leases all of a sudden are saying, we don't want the space. So now it's going to be a sublease. So I think one of the trends or the opportunities in the market that we might start to see, which you haven't seen a lot of, for a while, is probably a lot more sublease space, especially maybe in the office market, is particularly as tenants decide that they don't need all their space and they start to downsize and start to use parts of their space and not all of it. So this is one building. I think it's the next one. Neil, if you go to the next one. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. This is a deal that I was involved with 2 years ago. It's Prime Therapeutics. They occupy 25,000 square feet. Again, it was a call center, and they have just announced that they are vacating this space, 25,000 square feet. They still have 3 years remaining on the lease, and it is for sublease. So I think more than anything, what we're seeing in COVID is the way people are starting to use their space and how that's going to differentiate and change office spaces, particularly in the future. So as we go forward, I think there's opportunities not only to work with landlords on this, but also tenants that are vacating spaces. So I think we'll be presenting listing opportunities more to tenants, especially with the larger spaces, especially call center or large amounts of dense space for people. So I think it's just a trend to watch. I think you should be aware of it. And I'm sure other people have other stories, but that's kind of what I want to bring to the story, to the call today, Neil. And I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Walt. Anyone have questions for Walt with regard to those? All right. Otherwise,
how does the market look for people that are interested in that space? Are you getting any bites? Have they been listed yet?
These just literally came on the market this week. So that's, I haven't had any, there hasn't been a lot of activity yet, but I think these are two prime spots. And I think we'll see more of it as time goes on.
Thank you.
I've actually heard some of the same transition happening at mall spaces, large anchor vacant spaces being used for that type of thing, as well as e-commerce distribution. All right. Dina's up next, unless, Dina, you'd be more comfortable going last. You have to unmute. Dina, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Yep, can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Yep, sorry. I was laughing. I'm a Zimmerman, so I'm always at the end. So thanks for putting me at the beginning. Good morning, everybody. Walt, that was a great story and great case study, and I appreciate you sharing that, because that's, that's the thing. There are a lot of positives happening right now, and I know I genuinely run, for those who know me, sunshine and rainbows and on the positive side. And I think, well, that's a good thing. I'm also realistic, and unfortunately, we are seeing, on the retail side, a lot of closures, permanent closures now. The recent statistic, and this promise, I'm going to turn this positive, that I read at the beginning of August was thus far since March in Chicago. And I'm using Chicago as an example. In Chicago and then the surrounding suburbs, an estimated 4,400 businesses closed either temporarily or permanently. And the way things are tracking out, looks like likely at least 2,400 of them will not open their doors again. And, we do look at some of this big box retail, you look at Pier 1, you look at JCPenney, two really good examples of retailers who were struggling long before the pandemic. I always say they were on life support, so to speak, and the pandemic sort of pulled the plug. But that being said, you look at a whole other crop of retailers, of even, we're talking office users. You know, there's a lot of groups out there who are, I would make the argument, because of the pandemic, look at grocery, look at convenience, even, you know, I work a lot in the cannabis space. We can't find space fast enough for those types of users now. A lot of the retail spaces that I'm listing right now, we're leasing them. We're actually doing deals faster than I thought we would be doing deals right now, primarily either in that grocer, you know, liquor, convenience sector, and a lot of medical office as well, you know, who's scooping up now retail space. So just to kind of give you some broad strokes of kind of where we're at with retail. But when Neil had reached out, the success story I wanted to share is actually with a tenant of mine at the cooking school. Well, she started as a cooking school, and I helped her 7 years ago. And right before the pandemic, we were actually working on, you know, negotiating our first renewal option. Very exciting. She'd come from New York. You know, this was 7 years ago that we started working together, and it's, you know, it's always fun to see your clients succeed. The pandemic hits, guess what? Nobody wants to go to cooking classes, and for the foreseeable future, that social, you know, it's called the social table, that social aspect has now gone away. In the interim, late last year, I helped her open a small grocer convenience, very high end, you know, think a European bodega type concept right before Thanksgiving. Not a great time for her to open, and you know, she was using a lot. She had hired a butcher, and a lot of the product that she was selling in this grocery store she was also using for the cooking school, doing a lot of catering, what have you. You know, she had a few hiccups because, you know, the neighborhood needed to get to know her. She opened late due to permitting issues in the city of Chicago. No big surprise there. However, when the pandemic hit, she can't keep product on the shelf fast enough. And of course, everybody, you know, the best part of all of this, everybody wants to support local. So the neighborhood really came together, and she can provide products because she locally sources all of her products. She can provide them faster than our local Jewel, Mariano's, or even Whole Foods. Anyway, doing very well. We started talking about plans for her, you know, to expand, you know, once we sort of came out of this pandemic. Same conversation we're having with her filing bankruptcy on this other cooking school. Okay, like talk about yin and yang. All of a sudden, a bar with black iron and outdoor patio seating, which of course is the golden child right now in the food sector, came available right across the street from her. And this was back in April. And she called me, she goes, "Am I crazy? You know, I wanted to do a restaurant aspect to feed off of to feed off of the convenience store, but I didn't want to do that for another 18 months. But all of a sudden this came available. It's across the street. I could own this entire corner of Lincoln Square, arguably one of the very best corners, in my opinion, in Chicago, in this neighborhood, and right across the street from a park that when things get back to quote unquote normal, whatever that looks like, nonstop children all the time. And there's a real need in this neighborhood for brunch. So we thought, you know what, let's at least pursue this, because the worst that's going to happen is nothing, but at least, you know, we put out what is comfortable for us right now in terms of rent, you know, and understanding what if we do, you know, what if we do go backwards? What if we do shut down again? Anyway, long story short, we went to lease. We're almost finishing that up this week. And this is probably the first deal I've done. No, this is the first deal I've done next to an office deal I did on the tenant rep side, where we spent 2 weeks just negotiating COVID language successfully. Both parties came together, and here, the same day she's filing bankruptcy for her cooking school, she's expanding across the street her concept into a bar and restaurant. So I think the key is for this deal was, you know, understanding where her strengths were, pivoting in a way that was comfortable and successful for her. And I will tell you, for those who are doing restaurant deals, we baked in a ridiculous amount of free rent. So by the time she opens, and we started the deal also with a very, very significantly lower rent. The landlord's basically not going to make any money for the first 2 years, but we did a 10-year deal, and on the back end, he will recoup, and will have a return on his investment as well. So this really reminds me of the deals, tenant rep deals I was doing back during the recession, you know, especially in 10 and 11, where we were doing long-term deals, 10 to 15-year deals, where on the front end, it was a little bit more tenant-friendly, and on the back end, you know, with, you know, higher bumps and increases once a tenant has, you know, proven to be successful. And really, especially with restaurants, it's that first 18 months. and it was just getting really creative with deals. So if anybody wants any, has any questions or even wants to see some of the language we use, the contingency language regarding COVID and government mandated shutdowns, shoot me an email. I'm happy to share that with you.
Thanks, Dina. Any questions initially for Dina? That whole area of lease language to address COVID type issues, government shutdowns, health related issues, is going to be I think a persistent element moving forward. We did just get a lease ago, and the tenant suggested or requested that language be in their lease. The landlord didn't have anything. I reached out to, I threw out an all call to leasing@svn.com and got a couple good responses, and we actually used some of the language that folks sent me. So thank you. I can't remember who sent me the language, but we were able to use that in the lease. So our system works. All right. Out to Florida. Allie, good morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Well, thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to present today. I want to discuss as a case study Park Square Plaza, located on East Colonial near UCF of Orlando. This development had several challenges, and I want to discuss 3 portions of this at the present time. First, started off with Aussie Grill. Aussie Grill is Outback Steakhouse, Bloomin' Brands. They were expanding into the market with their new concept. They currently have 3 locations that they were able to open. They were looking for expansions throughout Florida. Ours was one on the out parcel that we have vacant. We were going to do a 2-tenant building with a drive-through for them. LOI was agreed on. Some minor changes came in, resent the LOI, and then COVID hit. And on March 9th, till March 17, I had no communication with them, and they left and dropped out of the market altogether. As a follow-up, I've discussed it several times with them, and they're still not ready to be back up. I think it's a great concept. I think they should, and hopefully in the future, start to expand again. Until we can probably get probably sometime, I would say, second quarter or mid next year, most likely. The second part I want to discuss is the soon-to-be vacated 24-Hour Fitness. That was who our anchor is. And as you know, 24-Hour Fitness filed bankruptcy. They had the location closed. They reopened, then they closed back up again. I believe at the present time they're still closed. We're waiting to see if we're going to do a restructure, a lease restructure. If not, I already have 2 backups, 2 strong backups, possibly 3 backups of leasing to fill in that space really quick. On the good note, on the adjacent photo that you see, there's a new student housing project. The good news on that is we had a hotel parcel, a little strip of land. We just recently sold it as of yesterday. So the landlord will at least offset some of their burn that they're experiencing by offsetting it with the closing of their land transaction. The inline space is still available for leasing, and that's on that side of town. I did want to reference, there is a new development I'm doing. It's Publix in Davenport, Florida, referred as Champions Crossing. That project is moving without any hiccups. We've only had a delay for opening reschedule. We are set to open in the fall of 2021. Tenant space has been very strong, waiting for some of the leases to come back. We've passed the LOI to the lease stage, so in the next 60 days, we'll have several leases on the inline and a few on the out parcels done. I hope to have that project successful, fully completed on or before opening of the Publix. And if you have any questions, and feel free to reach out to me for Orlando for any market or data information. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Allie. All right. So next up is Mary in Phoenix. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, Neil, and thank you so much for the opportunity. My team and I have been tracking, I'm going to open with this information that we've gathered from tracking about 12 of the REIT quarterly earnings calls, and we're seeing a strong trend that the REITs are speaking out about rent collections, and we found most interesting that they're saying a lot of the lessons that they learned during the recession, like Dina said, are being implemented now to be used as strategies. And one of the REIT CEOs was quoted as saying, it's not as much about what we buy as what we do with what we buy. And our Phoenix market has proven to be kind of set apart in that. He was quoting that their purchases and their centers are open air in the Dallas and other cities in Texas, markets in Arizona, which has contributed significantly to their success in that Arizona has a lot of incoming businesses, and with that comes housing. And so we're looking at opportunity here that presents itself because of those factors. So my story has to do with a client of mine that recently purchased what would be a category that would be unforeseen as being a place that you would lean towards instead of against, but it was a CrossFit business. And the reason that he looked at this fitness opportunity is that the person owning the business was coming to the end of his term and was moving out of the state for his wife's job opportunity, which was taking her away from Arizona. And so he had been a client of that CrossFit location and did not want to see that community be split apart by closures. So he stepped up, talked to the current owner, was able to purchase the business, the assets, the equipment at a fraction, obviously, of the cost that it would have been pre-COVID. And we negotiated a very favorable lease term with rent reduction, a lot of front-ended time to ramp up their business and give them a runway for success. And he has now been able to make an application through the Arizona Department of Health to open early, which was just approved 2 days ago. And so they will successfully be opening the business. And a couple of other examples of opportunity for me have been people that have specifically left corporate jobs, either through furlough or layoff or situations where they saw themselves vulnerable in their career at the at the disposal of a corporate entity. And so, like during the recession, decided to start a business of their own and to be in a position where they would no longer be vulnerable to someone else controlling their destiny or their future. So they've engaged in purchasing a franchise opportunity, one for a quick serve restaurant, taking over existing restaurant space. Another was a situation where I have an attorney that's opening a business that specifically does wills and trust formation. And so they're looking at situations where they'll be in a better control of their future destiny, won't be subject to layoffs or any kind of control of their future career through another person, but feel empowered to be able to create a different future than they would have had in a corporate position.
That's a good insight. Thank you, Mary. Any other comments or questions for her? Yeah, that entrepreneurial thing has been pretty much my whole adult life. And as the economy has cycled, while you might have to scramble a little bit, at least you don't have somebody on the outside making those decisions for you. So I support that. All right, back to Florida. Good morning, Les.
Morning, Neil. Thank you very much. In Florida, South Florida, I do warehouses, industrial packing plants, production plants. So who in the past year, or actually in the past 6 months, 8 months, has gone on a cruise, went to Rome, really went out of the country, or, again, the cruise ship business is just dead down here. What people are doing, they're improving their houses. They're doing the pool and patio companies down here have never been busier. Home Depot and Lowe's stocks way up. So people are taking care of their houses. This was a lease done by a company called Louise. They're a Netherlands-based window treatment company. Blinds, draperies, anything fabric for your home and apartments, condos, windows. They do the interior design. They make them. Anyway, we did a typical thing. We were out with them last year. They wanted to be in September, October of this year. Last week, located a place, had a place picked out in October, started negotiating the deal, and sure enough, COVID hit, and then the thing fell apart. The landlord, though, knew that this company had good credit. The landlord kept coming back to us, reducing the price, really begging us to come take the space, and it worked. They did the deal. It was signed in March for almost 50,000 square feet, 32-foot clear height building. This is in Miami. This is a former golf course that's been converted to industrial. It's Panattoni. Panattoni owns and develops this. So after the landlord came back to us and met our terms, it went pretty quickly. But in the beginning, it's funny how it switched though. In the beginning, the land was all landlord, and within the COVID, now it's all tenant. Now that we've come back and we're in August, coming in September of 2020. We're seeing it kind of shift again. We're seeing that this is going to be here for a while, and and landlords and tenants have to work together. The key is nothing's being built right now for build-to-suits or any office buildings, any fancy restaurants, any retail's not being built. Everything's being concentrated really industrial. So industrial is a flight to safety. People feel safe owning industrial. The REITs are buying everything in the world here. Land-wise, and they're converting, golf courses, retail's being converted to industrial. Industrial is a big thing down here in South Florida. So we're happy to have this lease done. Glad it happened, and really it was because the South Florida housing market is still hot, very hot. Anything under $300,000 sells in a week. So because of that, people need supplies for their house. People need improvements for their house. People are spending a lot of money in their homes, and this just goes to the fact that this is a housing improvement company. They needed the space.
Yeah, that's been a strong sector. Now, Les, you had this on a closing slide recently, right?
Correct. It was.
And can you share what the total lease value was?
Sure, $3.5 million. Worked out to about $8 per square foot triple net. The expenses here are about $3.50, so it's $11.50 per square foot is what the space is costing them. It was a 7-year deal, and they have some really high-end improvements in there. Of the 41,000 square feet, they're going to put in about 8,000 square feet of office space. Very high-end stuff. And again, they're from France, so they want their cake and eat it too.
All right. And I asked that specifically as a plug for the whole leasing council in our world. Certainly, on average, the deals are smaller than a lot of the sales, but there are opportunities to make some really strong commissions in the leasing world, and it's all driven by size and length of term and that sort of thing.
Sure. For SVN, if it's a minimum of $1 million, you can put it on the slide.
Right. So hope to see more of those.
Cool. Thanks, guys and ladies.
All right. Well, I have a couple to share. This location's just like a block from our office in downtown Geneva, Illinois. We're an hour west of Chicago. It's one of the oldest buildings in town. It's from the mid 1800s, 1850s. and is a retail space converted to office. About 4 or 5 years ago, I put in an association management company. They just wanted to be, they don't need the visibility at all, but they really wanted to be in the downtown. And the core of their services and their business is meeting planning. So you can imagine that they took it in the shins like a lot of businesses by March, once a lot of or most meetings started canceling. The association business is driven by conferences and conventions. So they notified their landlord, who is our client, that they weren't going to be able to fulfill their lease. We put it on the market, and by good fortune, about a week later, we're able to secure a financial planner, financial advisor who wanted to open an office in this market. So there was no gap in the lease term for this client. It's a beautiful space. It's got a lot of original finishes, hardwood floors. The brick is exposed. It's very loft-like feel. Tin ceilings, high, 12-foot ceilings and that. So it was a fun deal, and it was nice to be able to deliver something for our client. This next one is in St. Charles, and it is in a condo building. It was a large, well, it's a 35,000 square foot building, which was occupied entirely by Arthur Andersen before they collapsed back in 2001, 2002. But these are condos. The space that the prospect called on, or that we found for them, was just 3,200 square feet. They told me they were looking for 3,000 to 4,000 square feet, but lots of offices, lots of private offices, and it was specifically a COVID-related thing. This guy wanted his staff to be in private offices. We ended up expanding into the adjacent space. So they ended up taking 6,200 square feet. We negotiated a 10-year lease for them. And there were a lot of these hard-walled cubicles in the space. They're beautiful. And what they're going to do with those is put plexiglass up to the ceiling surrounding, and it really lends itself to it. It's a pretty easy transition. So they ended up with 19 private offices in the 6,000 square feet, and then about a dozen or so of these hard wall cubicles, which they're going to surround with plexiglass. And it really allows for a lot of that separation that's going to make it a little more comfortable for people to return to the office environment. One of the transitions we're hearing quite a bit about, and it's music to my ears being out in the burbs, is that many companies are looking at suburban locations, especially the one-story buildings where they have their own entrances, because a lot of the office-based organizations, both for-profit and not-for-profit, their staff don't want to ride the train. I think we just heard that ridership on the local metro is down 90% from a year ago. And then once you get downtown and you're in a 20 to 50 story building, there's elevators. So suburban office starts looking pretty good. All right, next up, and I think this, well, I don't remember where I got this. I will send this out as the details of it out as an email blast to leasing@svn.com. But here's a list of 10 retailers that have not been paying rent. It has changed from month to month. This particular group is paying like 35% or less of their rent as of July. And the article has, it's really like a slideshow, has more details, but Justice is closing a third of their 2,800 stores. Lane Bryant, 150 stores are going to close. I don't think they've been paying any rent. Most of these are now paying something. They may not have been paying anything in April and May, but June and July it starts picking up. Regal Cinemas been paying 13% of their rent. Victoria's Secret's going to be closing 250 stores in the US and Canada. They're up to 13% of their rent. So you know what the impact is on landlords when you're hearing these numbers. AMC Theaters is 100 cinemas. That's a sixth of their location. They've just been paying 14%. I think Ali mentioned 24-hour fitness in his presentation. Gap, Foot Locker's up to 36% of their rent being paid in July. And Bath and Body Works. So there's many more, but these were 10 that were singled out kind of at the extreme of not paying rent. And then the group on the positive side, 10 retailers that have been, Sportsman's Warehouse, they're at 100% rent payment. Sprouts, which I think is mostly out west. I know there's one in the Denver market. They have 350 locations. They're at 100%. Habit Burger, Dina's familiar with them, I'm sure. They're a Yum brand. JCPenney, and it doesn't mean things are going well for these folks. They've just been keeping their rent commitments. Many of them have actually already filed for bankruptcy and may be required to pay, but Century 21 is a department store chain, Century Theaters, Wingstop, Taco Bell, Big Lots, which is a big chain. They have 1,400 stores in 47 states. And finally, Steinmart. And Steinmart's on that list as the victim. They are closing all 279 of their stores, but they've been paying their rent. So anyway, we're obviously moving into our uncharted territory for the future, but business continues in every sector. As Les mentioned, industrial is particularly strong, but there's opportunities for resourceful advisors in every side, either with new vacancies or leasing, sales. All right, can open it up for anybody else, either that would like to share a story from their own experience, either deals that did or didn't happen, listing opportunities. Feel free to unmute yourself if you've got something you'd like to share.
Hey, this is Courtney down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Good morning, Courtney.
Good morning. I submitted a question in the chat box asking why the golf courses are going down in Florida. I thought that was kind of interesting to see that they're building industrial warehouse space on golf courses, because I know in Dallas, it's been really busier than ever at the golf courses, and I would have thought maybe in Florida it'd be the same, but maybe it's just that specific market. I don't know if
It's the millennials, Courtney. The millennials. I'm serious. They don't play golf. I mean,
Really?
it takes 5 hours. It takes 5 hours to play around the golf down here in the wintertime. And these guys are skateboarding. They're doing their BMX biking. They're surfing. And it's kind of sad because I grew up playing golf. But yeah. And then the price of golf is going down because there's so much competition down here. The beaches, the entertainment down here. So there's so much entertainment. And then these home builders are building. They're giving these old golf families big money for their property. It takes them 2 or 3 years to rezone it, and they're building homes on it, or they're building industrial. But it's kind of sad. But the whole when it comes South Florida, in Orlando North, there's more golf courses, but South Florida, West Palm Beach down, yeah, there's those millennials that they don't want to play golf.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And then I had one other thing. So I don't really do a ton of retail, and I had something come up where I am representing a hair salon that I actually have been going to for years. They needed to find another location. And so I found them a space. It's about 1,400 square feet. And I think they're asking like $33 or $34 a foot plus nets, which I think the nets fall about $13 a foot. And they're thinking they'll probably do a 5-year lease. What would be an appropriate TI amount to ask for in retail in the market that we're seeing right now? Does anybody have any insight? I just was curious since I'm not usually working in that particular product type.
That varies tremendously, both from market to market as well as landlord to landlord. It's one of the biggest variables. So I would reach out to somebody active in your market, even if they're, not SVN. Kind of poll a number of people, but ultimately it's up to the landlord and what they're willing to do to secure that tenant. Does anybody else have insights to offer on that?
Courtney, a lot of it also has to do with the current state of the space that you're looking at. If it's turnkey, ready to go, I'm just taking a day spa to market too. That was actually at the end of a lease term, and it's fully built out. So if you feel as though you need to do TI changes, especially if it has to do with water, which is a really expensive thing to deal with, then we're finding in our market at least that if a space is second generation and it's built out with ADA compliant restrooms and it's pretty equipped, that we can expect somewhere between $7 and $10 a square foot, maybe up to 15 depending upon the landlord. But the strength of your tenant's financials and their history in the business and what their resume looks like, how appealing they're going to be to a landlord is going to give you strength for that tenant improvement allowance ask.
And where are you located?
It's Mary, Phoenix.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah, the space they're looking at, it was a former T-Mobile space that vacated, and it's a perfect space because it's got a Pure Bar next to it, a juice bar, and several other types of tenants that are in the wellness kind of market. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much ready to go. It's mainly plumbing that would need to be moved, and then they would want to build out a wall. But everything else, I mean, the flooring, the walls, everything looks pretty good. So I'll keep that in mind. Thanks, Mary.
Courtney, you're also going to want to look at your HVAC load factor, because typically in salons where they create heat, need to have a good engineering component to the HVAC to counter the heat that's created with dryers and things like that. So look at your electrical and look at, you are definitely going to need plumbing infrastructure for shampoo bowls and things like that. So taking a pure retail use and converting it to salon space, you are going to want to have a more generous TI allowance than if you were bringing in another straightforward retailer.
Perfect. Thank you, Mary.
You bet.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I was just going to say that this is Tiffany. I'm in Florida, and I'm generally a buyer's rep, but I do a lot of office leasing and so forth. But one thing that if there is any TI to be done or anything to be built, we've even been putting the force majeure, including pandemic language, in the LOI because it has delayed permitting and contracting. So we've made sure that in anything we offer, that those delays also delay our timeline.
That's a great point. Thank you.
This is Tim Herbert from Jacksonville, Florida. I was just going to throw in for a salon. You also want to look at the electrical panel. It generally needs to be upgraded. You plug a bunch of blow dryers in, it will blow circuits. So that's a consideration going from straight retail to salon as well. And it's expensive.
Salon is actually a good example of something that is likely kind of like restaurant space. Second generation restaurant space is always in demand because of all the expenses of the items that have been mentioned. Salon space second generation will almost always have some demand, so it's a little easier to argue in favor of the tenant getting landlord participation on that. When something that's absolutely unique, and sometimes that infrastructure all has to be removed for the next tenant, then it's a little tougher sell to get strong TI dollars. All right, anybody else? Deal stories, questions? You've got a good group on the call. I'm really grateful for the discussion.
Neil, it's Walt Arnold. I just wanted to say that it's in these kind of times, and just like in 2008 and RTC days, there's always opportunities. So just be on the lookout for opportunities in your market. Look for, I think you'll see a lot of things that are, I know there's a lot of negativity out there, but there's also, for brokers, this is when people really need our services. So just think about that, and there will be a lot of opportunities in the market.
Couldn't agree more, Walt. Well, thanks again to everybody.
Neil, I have one more thing. This is Courtney. I figured since we had a little extra time.
Yes, ma'am.
I was curious if people are seeing, I know that you mentioned that there is a trend in people moving more towards the suburbs and having outdoor entry spaces, which we've seen a lot of. In fact, my father, he has 2 investment properties that are exactly that, and we're almost at full occupancy for both office spaces, which is great. But I was just curious if anyone's seeing trends of migration outside of the city. I know in the DFW area, we're seeing developments happening further and further out from the main metro areas. And I know we're definitely a hot spot for migration, but I was just curious, if people are seeing that, and then if so, commercially, what types of commercial businesses are following those trends as people start to expand outwards. If we're seeing certain retailers or certain developers going after the commercial markets in those areas.
Can you just, what was the question? I mean, what's the basis?
Yeah, so my question is which retailers and commercial developers are starting to follow the trends of migration outside of the main metropolitan areas? Like, for example, in Fort Worth, there is a development that my fiance and I are actually looking at moving to called Walsh, and it was formerly a ranch that is now being turned into a development that's going to have 8 elementary schools. It has, I think 50,000 plus people that are expected to be in that area. And I was just curious if these types of communities, if other people are seeing these popping up in their market, and if so, if they're seeing commercial following, and if they are seeing that trend, which types of commercial investors are going after that market to follow it.
You know what? I can tell you one thing from Southwest Florida, and this is on the West Coast, is that we're already the country. So we're seeing tons and tons of people move here from more congested areas. So we don't necessarily have the suburb versus the city because we're not really city, but we are. I mean, to give you an example, Lennar Homes in Southwest Florida sold 100 homes just in May, sight unseen, from people moving from New York, New Jersey, Chicago, all these places. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing down here.
Courtney, with regard to the commercial component following residential growth, there's some, this trend has been going on for suburban development for decades, and this is just kind of a specialized version of it. I think you'll see some of the predictable daily needs kind of support, the grocery stores, hair salons, coffee shops, that kind of thing that drives traffic. And then the more conventional retailers and convenience retailers will start following that. You'll usually see, you know, hardware stores and the lumber yards and that sort of thing following too. Just a thought. But it's a life cycle. It takes a while. They need the rooftops first, as a rule.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was just mainly, I was curious if there was any particular, I guess, first mover type commercial businesses that tend to go in there. And those types make most sense. I agree. I just didn't know if there were any particular names to try to target to get people to move, move quickly into that commercial type environment once they get more information about it.
Yeah, and that's, I think if you look at parallel communities and look at what brands are there, that's often the best indicator of what will move into these other communities. It's often a very regional kind of thing.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Well, I'm going to let you get back to your day. Thank you for taking time on this call. Feel free to reach out to Walt or me at any point with regard to leasing questions. If we get the answer, we'll try to point you in the right direction. Have a good rest of your day. Stay healthy. I hope you have a profitable rest of the year.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Neil.
Thanks, Julian.